Welcome, dear brave soul. You're tuning into Horror Podcast, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're a long-time listener or just stumbled upon this channel, thank you for joining me for another scary tale. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. I wasn't always a fan of dating apps. For the longest time, I avoided them, telling myself I was too old-fashioned for swiping. I wanted to meet someone the natural way, through a friend, at a bookstore, maybe even just standing in line at a coffee shop. But after moving to a mid-sized city where I didn't know anyone, the silence of my apartment got to me. Working home, that was it. The loneliness started to press down on me, and I finally gave in. I told myself I'd just try it casually, just to see what was out there, not because I was desperate. But the truth is, sometimes we bend our own rules when the nights get too quiet. My name's Daniel, and by the time this happened, I'd already gone through a handful of forgettable dates from different apps. Most were fine, awkward small talk, a couple of drinks, and then that mutual understanding that neither of us would text again. Nothing terrible, nothing memorable. But then I met her, or at least who I thought she was. Her profile popped up on Instagram first, though she wasn't following me. Auburn hair, full lips, this retro pinup style that felt both casual and put together. Not overdone, not filtered into something unrealistic. She had around 15,000 followers, which I thought was high, but not impossible. Her pictures were a mix of travel shots, selfies, and apartment backgrounds. She looked like someone who had a life, but wasn't trying to show it off. Her name was Callie, and one night, she left a comment on one of my reels. Just something small. "You're funny. Remind me of someone I used to know." I clicked on her profile again. It looked real. No obvious watermarks, no reposted content, no scammy links. I messaged her. Just a simple, "You have jokes too," or "just compliments." She replied in under an hour. From there, we started messaging almost every day. Voice notes in the morning, quick DMs at lunch, longer chats at night. She said she worked in PR, had grown up in New York, but moved south for a slower life. She complained about missing bagels, joked about her landlord, talked about how exhausting it was when people assumed she was fake because of how she looked. It made me feel protective in a weird way, like she was misunderstood. Her tone made me think she was the kind of person who lived in the gray space between confidence and vulnerability. Someone who wanted to be noticed, but not in the way people on the internet usually wanted attention. She told me she hated parties, that she preferred cooking at home and binging shows instead. She said she was tired of men treating her like she was a trophy rather than a person. At the time, I believed her. Every word felt like an inside glimpse. After a couple weeks, she invited me over for dinner. She said she loved cooking and wanted me to try her jerk shrimp pasta. She joked that if I didn't like it, I'd still have to pretend. I laughed, even though something about the idea of going to someone's house before meeting them in public gave me pause. Her place was in a neighborhood about an hour away, older duplexes with peeling paint and narrow streets. The kind of area where some houses were cared for, and others looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. When I pulled up, the sun had just dipped below the skyline, and the streetlights didn't work. It was the kind of dim, uneven light that made every shadow stretch longer than it should. I texted her here, "Upstairs, right?" She replied instantly, "Yep, doors open. Come up." The stairs creaked as I climbed them. Each step groaned under my weight, the sound echoing in a way that made me hyper-aware of how alone I was. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately, but it wasn't her. A man stood there, shaved head, tattoos crawling up his neck, tank top stained with sweat. His eyes flicked up and down like he was sizing me up. He looked me over, smirked, and stepped aside. "Yeah, come in," he said. I froze. I'm looking for Callie. She'll be out in a sec. Have a seat." The living room smelled like mildew and cigarettes. The furniture sagged with age, cushions pressed flat by years of use. An ashtray spilled over on the coffee table, cigarettes stacked in messy layers. There was a faint smell of something sour underneath it all, like old food left too long in the sink. My stomach tightened, but I sat anyway, telling myself maybe she just had a roommate. He disappeared into the kitchen, calling back, "Want a drink?" "Sure," I said automatically, my voice sounding smaller than I meant it to. While he was gone, I pulled out my phone and texted her. "I'm here. Can you come out?" Her reply buzzed through instantly. 1 second. Then I noticed his phone on the table. A beat-up Android with a cracked case. When I texted her again, his screen lit up. My name appeared on the lock screen. My chest went cold. My stomach twisted into knots. I shoved my phone back in my pocket, just as he returned with 2 mismatched cups, filled with something dark. He handed me one, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if he was watching for my reaction. I held it, but didn't drink. We sat in silence for a moment. The TV was on, muted, an old sitcom laugh track flickering in the background. My pulse hammered in my ears. Then his phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, then at me, and in that moment, we both knew. He stood slowly. "Guess you figured it out." I stood too, my voice low. "Yeah, I think I'm gonna head out." He moved fast, reaching for my arm. His hand brushed my sleeve, but instinct took over before he could get a grip. I swung hard, my fist connecting with his jaw. The crack of impact echoed in the small room. He stumbled, crashing into the coffee table. The cup spilled, liquid soaking into the rug. I bolted, down the stairs, 2 at a time, the wood groaning under my weight. Into the street, into my car. I locked the doors, floored it, and didn't look back. I drove until I saw a gas station with lights on. The bright fluorescence felt like safety. I parked, hands trembling so badly I could barely hit the numbers on my phone, and called the cops. By the time they got there, he was still inside the apartment, dazed and groaning. There was no Callie. No woman had ever lived there. Just a cracked phone filled with dozens of conversations like mine, voice memos faked with audio apps, pictures lifted from a Canadian influencer's public account. I wasn't the first. The officer told me I was lucky. That word sat in my chest like a weight. Guys had been lured there before. Some had been robbed, others beaten. A few had everything taken, phones, wallets, even their cars. Me? I walked away with a bruised knuckle and a broken sense of trust. I deleted Instagram for a while after that. I swore off meeting strangers from apps. But even now, when I scroll through social media and see a perfectly curated profile, I think about that night. I think about how easily I walked into a trap, and I wonder about the next guy, the one who won't punch back. I wasn't looking for love, not really. At least not the kind people write songs about. What I wanted back then was connection, something to break up the nights that felt too quiet, and the mornings that felt like reruns of each other. At 27, living alone in a rented apartment outside Phoenix, my life was unstructured. My schedule never synced with anyone else's. I worked late shifts at a members-only lounge, a job I described to friends as event coordination, because the truth didn't fit into polite conversation. What I really did was walk a tightrope between entertaining and keeping boundaries, smiling just enough, laughing just enough, and disappearing into the background when the air got heavy with expectation. I tried to keep it all separate. Work was one thing, my personal life was another. The men who paid for a few hours of attention were never the men I thought about when I lay down at night. But the truth was, lines blur when you're tired. When I was lying in bed at 2 a.m, the ceiling fan humming, the city lights bleeding in through the blinds, it was easy to give in to scrolling. thumb over glass, one profile after another, hoping that somewhere between the ones who asked for no drama and the ones who wanted only hookups, there might be someone who was real. My name's Tessa, and the thing that hooked me into online dating wasn't excitement. It wasn't curiosity. It was hope. Hope that in the endless scroll, in the parade of faces with bios that blurred together, there might be someone who would actually see me. Not just see what I looked like in dim lighting with a drink in my hand. Not just see the version of me I wore at work. I wanted someone to see me when I was in sweatpants, hair pulled up messily, eating cereal out of a chip bowl at 11 in the morning. Someone who wouldn't treat me like I was disposable, like I was something to be sampled and discarded. That's how I met Jaden. He found me on Hinge. His profile looked carefully imperfect, like it had been designed to look natural but not curated. Messy dark hair, a crooked grin that seemed effortless, a photo with a pit bull on a leash, and another of him holding a book on Eastern philosophy like it was just something he happened to read. Not flashy, not overdone, normal. His first message was a dry joke about the cheesy line in my bio, the one where I admitted my guilty pleasure was late-night drive-through tacos. "So what you're saying," he wrote, "is that you'd leave me for Taco Bell at 2 a.m.? I smiled. I replied. It felt like banter. That was the start of it. We messaged constantly after that. Mornings when I was pouring coffee, I'd find a new message waiting. Midday, while I was slumped on my couch before work, he'd text something funny or thoughtful. At night, when the lounge was full and the air smelled of cologne, alcohol, and cigarette smoke, I'd slip into the back hallway and check my phone just to read his words. He asked questions that weren't surface level. He didn't push for pictures. He didn't turn every conversation into something sexual. He was smart, funny, calm, the exact opposite of the men who fill my nights. And maybe that was what I was drawn to. He felt like the relief I hadn't realized I was desperate for. 2 weeks in, I was hooked. I thought about him when I was driving to work, when I was folding laundry, when I was stuck in traffic on the I-10. We hadn't met yet, but the anticipation felt safe. I liked the idea of him. I liked the way the words made me feel, the way he made me laugh without even being in the same room. Then one Friday night, after a long shift, my feet aching in heels I hated, I messaged him. "I'm off. Want to finally meet?" "Yeah," he replied almost instantly. "Come over. I'll text the address." I hesitated. Meeting at his place wasn't what I had planned. I had my own rules. Always public, always neutral ground. But it was late, I was tired, and he lived in Tempe. A quiet suburb, safe enough, with cul-de-sacs and trimmed hedges and front porches that looked like families grilled out on weekends. The kind of place where you'd picture kids riding bikes, not danger. I told myself it would be fine. I grabbed my keys, rolled the windows down to let the desert air in, and drove through the night, the radio low, the streets half empty. He was waiting at the door when I pulled up. He looked better in person, taller, sharper jawline, that same easy grin from his photos. His presence was magnetic in a way that made me forget the small alarm bells in my head. "Hey," he said, stepping aside with a smile. "Glad you came." Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar, mixed with a haze of weed. There was music playing softly, ambient, electronic, something I didn't recognize. The kind of soundtrack that made the air feel heavier than it was. We didn't bother with small talk. Within minutes, we were against the wall, kissing. My head spun, but not just from desire. It was relief. Relief that the connection was real, that I hadn't made it up in my head, that the person who sent those thoughtful messages existed outside of a screen. But it shifted fast. His grip tightened. His kisses got rougher, demanding instead of eager. I thought maybe it was nerves or just intensity, but then he said things, not playful, not sexy, things that cut. "You like being used, don't you?" he whispered against my ear. I froze. "What?" He looked down at me, his hand sliding from my waist up to my throat. Not quite squeezing, but pressing, testing. "Don't act surprised. I know where you work. I know what you do. Every muscle in my body locked. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. I had never told him about my job. Not once. He kept going, voice calm, steady. Details. The name of the lounge. The layout of the back rooms. Even the name of my shift manager. Things I had never once mentioned. Things he shouldn't have known. My mind raced. Maybe he'd been a customer. Maybe someone had given him my number. Maybe I'd slipped somehow. But the reason didn't matter. What mattered was that I realized in that moment I wasn't safe. Not in his house. Not in his bed. Not anywhere near him. The rest of the night blurred into fragments. The weight of him pressing me down. His voice in my ear. The words sharp and cruel. The sound of the floor creaking under us. The air heavy with that cedarweed smell that clung to everything. I don't remember crying. I remember trying not to. I remember staring at the ceiling and willing myself to go still, to let it end faster, because fighting felt like it would only make it worse. By morning, he acted like nothing was wrong. He offered me coffee, leaned casually against the counter, like we were just two people waking up after a date. Told me to stay, told me he wanted to spend the day together. His face was the same, but his eyes looked different to me now. Flat, calculating. I left while he was in the shower. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice before I managed to fit them into the ignition. I drove home with my chest tight, the sun already high and blinding in the Arizona sky. I told two of my coworkers what happened. One of them laughed like it was some story about a bad hookup. Another said I must have sent mixed signals. A third looked uncomfortable and muttered that I should just forget about it, that talking about it would make things worse. Their dismissal hit harder than I expected. It was worse than being ignored. It was being blamed. So, I turned to my friends outside of work. That didn't go much better. They knew about my job, and even though they didn't say it directly, I could see it in their faces, hear it in their silences. What did you expect? The next day, I went to a clinic. I needed to know if anything had happened while I blacked out. The waiting room was small, mismatched chairs lined up along the wall. A faded poster about flu shots peeling at the corners. I sat in the corner, arms folded tight, scrolling through my phone, pretending none of it had happened. That's when I saw it. A screenshot of my dating profile. My photo. My bio. But twisted into a meme. Posted on a gossip page that catered to the local nightlife. He had shared it. He turned me into a joke. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. I wept quietly, biting the inside of my cheek, while strangers flipped through magazines 2 chairs away. The test came back negative. No pregnancy, no diseases, no physical evidence. But that didn't make me feel safe. It only made me feel invisible. Jaden never contacted me again. He didn't have to. He got what he wanted. Then he vanished. I quit the lounge a month later. I couldn't keep pretending to be someone unbreakable. I couldn't keep playing the role of someone untouched. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I still don't know how he found out where I worked. Maybe I slipped without realizing it. Maybe he'd been in the room before. Maybe someone told him. But the truth doesn't matter. The truth doesn't change what happened. What I do know is that no one believed me the way I needed them to. Not my coworkers. Not my friends. Everyone had some version of, "You should have known better," as if wanting to believe in someone was a crime. It's been years, and I've built a different life. A safer one, steadier. But even now, when my phone buzzes late at night, I hesitate before checking it. I still catch myself glancing at crowds, scanning faces, wondering if someone's watching me from a distance. Waiting. Please learn from me. Don't confuse attention with affection. Don't assume flattery means safety. And don't ever think that because something feels good at first, it means you're okay. Because not all monsters hide in alleys. Some of them smile at you through a dating app. I never really believed in the idea of fairy tale love. Not because I was cynical, but because my life never gave me reason to think it could happen. My mom worked long hours at the diner to keep food on the table, and My dad wasn't around except for the occasional awkward phone call from somewhere downstate. Romance, magic, happily ever after. It all felt like stuff other people got to experience, not me. But like most girls who spent too many nights lying awake in a quiet bedroom, I still hope someone out there might see me. Not the tired girl folding clothes at the mall. Not the quiet cashier who always said, "Have a nice day," with a forced smile. I wanted someone to look past all that and actually say, "You matter." My name's Lacey, and back in 2001, I was 18, just out of high school and still living with my mom and younger brother in a duplex outside Knoxville, Tennessee. The place smelled faintly of mildew and fried food, no matter how much we cleaned. That was the year I started spending way too much time on the family computer, tucked in a corner of the living room. Dial-up internet, the kind that screeched and whined every time you logged in. Back then, online dating wasn't on an app. It was sketchy websites, chat rooms, message boards. It wasn't mainstream yet, but it wasn't completely taboo either. Just new, mysterious, maybe a little dangerous, though none of us admitted that part out loud. That's where I met him. He called himself Shane. His username was Southbound79, which should have been a clue he was older, but at the time I didn't think twice. His profile had a grainy picture of him standing next to a dog. Looked like a retriever, with his face half in shadow. He said he was 23. Later I'd learned that wasn't true, but at 18, 23 didn't feel like a red flag. He messaged me one night after I'd posted in a local Tennessee chat thread. His words felt different from the usual, "Hey sexy" junk that clogged my inbox. He was funny, quick with sarcastic jokes, and kind of poetic in a way that felt like he'd read too many song lyrics. He told me I had an old soul, that my favorite band, the Cranberries, meant I wasn't shallow like everyone else. Looking back, I should have recognized the flattery for what it was. But when you've never really been loved before, even a flicker of attention feels like a wildfire. We met in person 2 weeks later at a diner off Kingston Pike. I remember the smell of burnt coffee and the way my hand shook as I pushed open the glass door. When he walked in, my stomach dropped. He wasn't 23. He was older, closer to late 20s, maybe even 30. Tattoos snaked up his forearms, and he had a cigarette tucked behind one ear. But when he smiled, it was disarming, like he was the lead in some brooding indie film. "I didn't lie," he said with a half laugh when I called him out. "I just didn't want you to write me off." And I didn't. I should have, but I didn't. That first year was a blur of off and on flings. He'd disappear for weeks, then show up outside my work with a grin and some cheap gift. I'd swear I was done, then answer his calls when I got lonely. It never felt real until it suddenly did. One December night, he showed up outside the mall where I worked with a beat-up Rose and a box of Pop-Tarts. "I want to be with you," he said. For real, not just messing around. It was freezing. My hands trembled, and I wanted so badly for someone to claim me, to choose me, that I said yes. By spring, I was practically living at his place, a rundown rental behind a pawn shop. I was still working part-time and taking night classes at the community college. He kept losing jobs, dishwasher at a bar, warehouse work, always blaming someone else. "People don't like me because I don't kiss ass," he'd say. Lighting another cigarette like that made him noble. At first, the fights were just words. He'd sulk when I asked him to clean up or look for work. Then the accusations started. "Why'd you wear that shirt? Trying to make your boss stare at your chest." Or, "Why'd it take so long to get home? Who were you with?" I laughed it off at first, tried to reassure him, tried harder to please him. I told myself he was insecure, that love meant sticking around even when it got messy. But it didn't stop. I moved in full-time a few months after my 19th birthday. I told myself it was romantic, that it meant we were starting fresh. Instead, it felt like being buried alive. I'd get home from class after midnight, exhausted, only to find him high or drunk, glaring like I'd betrayed him by bettering myself. "You think you're better than me now?" He spat once, knocking a plate of spaghetti off the table. Another time, he grabbed my textbooks and hurled them out the window. If school's more important, go sleep at the damn library. The first time he hit me, it was because I laughed too loud at something on TV while he was ranting. He punched my arm, then shrugged it off. It's not abuse if you deserved it, he told me later, and some part of me believed him. When I found out I was pregnant, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried until my ribs ached. He was excited at first, or maybe he just liked the idea of control. Got you now, he whispered one night, running his fingers through my hair. You're mine forever. I wasn't excited. I was terrified. Our son was born in January, the kind of winter where the cold stings your lungs and the pipes freeze. The moment I saw him, I promised myself he would never know the man his father really was. I kept that promise as long as I could. The worst night of my life started like any other. Shane went out with a friend, Troy, a guy I barely knew. They came back late. Snow was falling in heavy, silent sheets outside. I was rocking the baby in the living room, watching reruns of ER on mute. Shane stumbled in, drunk or high or both, grinning at nothing. House smells like shit, he muttered. I just changed him. I said gently, it's probably the diaper bag. He chuckled, but it wasn't funny. It was that low, mean laugh he always gave before things got bad. You always got a reason, huh? Always some excuse. I clutched our son closer, stomach turning to ice. Troy shifted awkwardly by the door, holding a beer, clearly uncomfortable. Then Shane snapped. He screamed something I can't even remember now. Something about how I ruined his life, and lunged at me. I shoved the baby into Troy's arms. Please, just keep him safe, I whispered. Then I turned and took the first blow. He yanked my hair, so hard I felt it tear from my scalp, slammed me against the wall, kicked me until I couldn't breathe. I crawled for the phone, clawing at the landline. By some miracle, I hit 911 before he ripped it away and smashed it against my face. My lips split. He pressed his hands to my throat until black spots filled my vision. I'm going to kill you, he whispered. And for the first time, I believed him. Then came pounding at the door. Police. Troy must have left it unlocked. Shane tried to lie, said everything was fine. The baby was just crying. But when I stumbled into view, bloodied, barefoot, lips split, and one eye swelling shut, the officer's face went hard. He yanked Shane outside and slammed him against the porch railing. The rest was a blur. Ambulance lights, statements, flashbulbs, a doctor telling me I had a hairline fracture in my cheek, that I was lucky to be alive. An officer telling me I was the worst beating victim he'd seen, still breathing. Shane called from jail the next day. His words, why'd you do this? No, I'm sorry. Not are you okay? Just blame. He was sentenced to 30 days. He served none. Fled to Georgia before they could bring him in. Months later, he found me again. Notes under my windshield. Messages. Once, he even showed up outside my new apartment. I refused to go back. Eventually, he moved on. I wish I could say that's where it ended. But the next girl wasn't so lucky. Her name was Rebecca. I didn't know her, but I saw the article. He beat her to death in a trailer outside Macon. He finally got life in prison. The photo in the paper showed the same man who once kissed my forehead and brought me Pop-Tarts. Only now his eyes were empty. It's been years. My son is older now, and he doesn't remember those early days. Thank God. I've told him pieces of the story, just enough. I'm remarried to a good man who never raises his voice at me, who never makes me feel small. But sometimes I still wake up gasping, still hear the crack of the phone breaking against my face, still feel Shane's hands tightening around my throat. Trauma doesn't fade. It doesn't disappear. It just stops bleeding. The scars remain, and so does the memory of who he was, and who I almost didn't survive.